next to Mr. Pożarlik, we have Mr. Michael Quas from Germany. Since 2015, he is the project coordinator of the Konrad Adenauer Foundation in Warsaw, here in Poland. He studied history, literature, and interdisciplinary cultural studies at the universities of Erfurt and Wrocław. And he was a junior scholar at the Cold War International History Project at the Woodrow Wilson International Center in Washington, D.C. And he gathered experience in NGOs like think tank, political dialogue and analysis, and at the Polish-German youth work. And he's the project assistant of the Federal Foundation on Remembrance, Responsibility and Future. And last but not least, we have Mr. Tomáš Jungwirth from the Czech Republic. He is a policy officer at the Consortium of Migrants Assisting Organization at the Czech Republic. He is a research fellow at AMO Research Center with a research focus on Southeastern Europe. And he graduated from law faculty at Charles University in Prague and democracy and human rights in the Western Balkans at universities of Sarajevo and Bologna. And in the past, he worked as an analyst for a political party manager of Senate election campaigns, assistant to an MP or teacher at a secondary school. And last but not least, again, he is a participant of our VSPS migration program. So please welcome him. So before we turn to our panelists, I would like to show you some thoughts of myself. And I'm really happy that we had the first panel discussion with this comprehensive approach on EU migration policy and with the definitions already defined and explained, because we don't need to deal with that in this panel. We will rather concentrate on perceptions and also on some policy issues, because perceptions are shaped by policies. So we cannot neglect this part. So when I came here to the conference, I was thinking about why are we all invited to Cracow to discuss issues on migration. And I came to the obvious conclusion that it's because we have a crisis. Because we have. But what kind of crisis we have is the question. Some call it a refugee crisis, some call it a solidarity crisis, some call it an identity crisis. But one thing is sure, that if everything was all right with migration in the European Union, we wouldn't be sitting here. And although the crisis of migration in the EU has been a defining issue of the community from the beginnings, this crisis hit the EU as a surprise. And I would like to raise attention to my first point, which is perceptions. So it depends on the storyteller who is the subject of the crisis. For example, if we ask a volunteer, do we have volunteers here in the room? Please raise your hands if you are a volunteer, if you have ever volunteered. We have some, yeah, I see. So if you ask a volunteer or a refugee, he would say that it's a crisis of humanity. If you ask someone from the European institutions, from the EU, maybe we have some people here who worked in the EU as a trainee or as an employee, they would say that it's an institutional crisis. It's a crisis of the European Union. And if we ask some of the Visegrád states, or especially Hungary, which I know the most because I'm coming from Hungary, they would say that it's a crisis of identity, crisis of culture, crisis of the European culture. And I'm just emphasizing this because I would like you to understand that there are different perceptions. First, you have to understand these perceptions before you judge them, and after you understood them, if you have another opinion, you can try to convince the other peoples, the other groups of your opinion. That was my first point. My second point would be what kind of impact it had on the EU. So even though migration has always been there, it was a really, really big surprise. And the EU couldn't deal with the issue. The EU's migration system collapsed with the collapse of the Dublin Agreement. And it was followed by, and it was the first point of crisis of solidarity, the first sign of the lack of solidarity. Hungary in 2015 closed its border in autumn. It built a fence, as you know, as we all know, and all of the pressure was put on Greece and also partly on Slovenia and Croatia on our southern border. And it was the first sign of solidarity. My second point is that we have to see that this war crisis created implied different answers in the EU from the member countries. On one hand, we have the German answer, because in Germany the power of solidarity overcome the populist answer, the far-right answer, because they also have it, but the power of solidarity was much stronger in the society than the other side. However, on the other hand, we have the European, the Visegrád countries, some of the Visegrád countries in Central Europe. We will see in our panel discussion how coherent is the Visegrád group in this issue, where the populist forces were much stronger. Security against terrorist threats, protection of national identities, and the protection of societal coherence become to rule the public discussion, the public opinion. So finally, as my final word, we can see that it's clear that the huge inflow of migrants divided Europe, and deriving from all of this, it is clear, as it was already discussed in the first panel, that the whole EU asylum policy needs a reform. But as there is a huge divergence of interest in the European Union, the EU gave another answer with the Turkey deal. It is outsourcing the human rights violations from the territory of the European Union to an extra territory, to Turkey, which is not a member of the EU, and thus acts if these human rights violations wouldn't exist anymore. And it's becoming a narrative now with the deal last year, October, with Afghanistan, which the EU made with the expulsion of a huge proportion of Afghans from the European Union, mainly from Germany. It has already started. There are Afghans who are sent back to Afghanistan, which is undoubtedly a war-torn country, and the EU turns a blind eye on it. And my question to you and also to my panelists, maybe they can touch upon this issue, would be: is this the Europe we want to live in? Is the European Union acting according to the values on the basis it was founded? This would be my final word, and thank you very much for your attention. At first, I would like to call Mr. Jungwirth to speak a little bit about the historical narrative and give us an introduction to our panel.
Thank you, Laszlo, and thank you everybody for having me here. It's a real privilege to be here on the panel. Since I work in policy and advocacy, I will try to bring a bit of a policy perspective on the diverging narratives and the actual policy in place in Germany and the V4. Because we all see that there is the divide, but I think we need to go a little bit into depth to see what is really happening on the ground and what are the real differences, and also what are the motivations of the political leaders and the countries as such to have contrasting policy opinions and proposals. And I think it was a great opportunity that we had the first panel, in which we got a pretty thorough introduction into the topic, including what is happening on the European level. And I would now go a bit deeper into the specific context. And maybe even what you suggest, question a little bit some suggestions about Germany being the cradle of solidarity and the V4 being the cradle of selfishness, because I think it can all be quite easily broken down to very specific policy narratives and proposals that can be deconstructed and quite easily understood in a very rational manner. So if we start with Germany and we look into the 1990s, or actually the 1980s, when the Dublin system was being constructed and being made, and the principle of the first country of entry being responsible for an asylum application request, Germany was actually for a long time a proponent, an advocate of this system, because for it was of course quite favorable to have those countries on the edges of the European Union being responsible for a majority of the refugees coming there and seeking asylum. And this has basically only been changing in the past years. It is true, in the early 1990s, Germany has taken a lot of refugees, especially from former Yugoslavia and from former Soviet countries. But if you look at the statistics from 2002 till 2011, Germany was actually accepting less refugees than France, and in most of those years also less than the United Kingdom. So what has changed actually then? With the current so-called refugee crisis, is that Germany has changed or moved from a destination country to the destination country for refugees, being really the number one country for people who seek international protection to come to. And the numbers, of course, of asylum applications have surged. And in this context, Germany is seeking a reform of the current system, which has never, and that's important to really bear in mind, Dublin system was never constructed for a million or 2 million applications a year. It was always constructed for up to 200,000, 300,000 a year, which was the standard for many years. In even like 5 years ago, it would be 300,000 applications a year, and then suddenly it quadrupled or even more. And now Germany is actually looking for a way to share their burden and asking actually the other European countries, obviously, to also chip in and be helpful in this regard. It must be said, yes, I mean, under Dublin, technically, Germany was not responsible for a majority of the asylum applications that have come in 2014, 2015, and 16. But since at one point in 2015, there was no plan B for the broken Dublin system, and there were thousands and tens of thousands of asylum seekers already on the way, and in Europe, mostly in Hungary and on the Balkan route, the integrity of the Schengen system was very much endangered at that point, and it could have easily broken down. And what Angela Merkel and Germany as such did at that point was saying, okay, we will accept and admit those Syrian refugees seeking asylum to Germany, and by this very move, they actually saved the integrity of the Schengen system. It is also true that it's not only the Syrians who have come to Germany in the end, because at this point it wasn't possible to screen those people and control really who is coming. So in the end, a lot more people from Iraq, Afghanistan, but also other countries have come to Germany. What we're seeing now is an attempt to reinstate the status quo in some regard, to reinstate the Dublin system. As we heard in the first panel, there should be returns of refugees to Greece and to other first countries of entry. And this is what Germany is working on intensely. Second of all, however, of course, it is also working on an externalization of migration, as Laszlo has said. It is about limiting the number of people coming to Europe and having somebody else really take responsibility for their asylum claims. A typical result of this is the EU-Turkey deal, which, if we actually look at it, by the way, is a press statement. It's no legally binding document in the classical sense under the EU acquis. It's a press statement, which has been then developed into various ways. Then on the other hand, if I quite quickly jump to the Visegrád countries, we see that, of course, all those countries have had some experience with irregular migration. I think we should really distinguish. If we speak about migration, usually here we mean irregular migration, which means migration without a valid visa or a permit to stay. And that could be, of course, refugees or people who do not have, classify or qualify for international protection, but still they are coming without their valid visa. And the V4, especially in respect to the Balkan wars, yes, has had experience with migration since the 1990s. However, I would say that while joining the European Union, or up until very recently, migration was never a topic. It was a social and political non-issue in the Visegrád countries, and this has changed very suddenly in the past years. And I would also say that when the Visegrád countries joined the EU, they never really felt they would have to face and show such solidarity with the other member states, and they were never really, the societies were never really prepared for it. They didn't really know what to expect or that this would be coming. And at that point, when this has happened, I think the situation has changed dramatically, and the Visegrád societies and its political leaders simply said, no, we're not going to do this, we're not going to go with the German proposal, we're not going to share a burden of the refugees, of the asylum seekers. And instead, the Visegrád has actually reinstated and re-identified itself as a power bloc against the so-called dictate of the Brussels and Berlin, which in this context is very much interchangeable. So, at the same time, we should say also that Visegrád is the countries are full supporters of the external dimension of the European policy. So Visegrád countries are supporting the externalization of migration, the deals with the third countries, and in this sense they're making no trouble. But this is not what makes the press. What makes the press are the migrant quotas and things like this, which are the most controversial ones. The problem, of course, is that the Visegrád countries do not propose a viable alternative. Very much, they might actually be happy with the status quo, with the Dublin system as it is. However, the Dublin system simply is not ready to function anymore in reflection of the numbers of people coming in. So what we saw, just to conclude very shortly, what we saw in the fall of last year was the Visegrád countries being pushed to actually propose something solid. It was a question of, okay, you're against the quotas, you're not resettling people either. So what is your proposal? And what we saw was the proposal for a so-called flexible, or later renamed to effective solidarity, which, if you look at what it is based on, it's a Slovak presidency non-paper, 2 pages, and it says nothing. It's completely contentless. I mean, fair enough, but we actually expected, and Kasia said, okay, Visegrád countries are able already to show solidarity in economic terms, marketing the issue. But it doesn't even say strictly we are able already to contribute financially. It just said we will do our best to the best of our capacities and with the use of our resources, which doesn't really tell you anything. And Brussels and Berlin in particular were not very happy about that proposal. However, it is true that Visegrád has actually reinstalled itself as a power bloc in this context and is very much likely to block the German initiative for a permanent resettlement scheme. And just a question maybe to finish up, to wrap up. So on one hand, you actually, in this area of asylum, which is a shared competence, as Marta has said in the first panel, in the European level, you have a push for harmonization. You have a push, actually, a European Commission proposals for the replacement of directives by regulations, which would be directly applicable. And this is also what Berlin wants, really, and they want a permanent relocation scheme within the European Union. On the other hand, of course, you have the Visegrád countries, which are much more advocating for renationalization of the asylum systems, saying maybe it was, well, they're not saying it out loud, but I think they're thinking it. Maybe it wasn't a mistake to go for a common asylum system at the first place. Maybe this should become a privilege of each of the countries, of their sovereign decision. But how do you reconcile that in a Schengen area? I think that's the Gordian knot we don't really know how to untie. And this is what I think in 2017 the discussion is going to be about. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tomáš. And now I would turn to Mr. Pożarlik and ask him about the public perception of migration in the Visegrád 4 countries.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Very kind introduction, and thank you very much for the invitation to this conference. I would like to discuss with you today the correlation between public opinion and the refugee migration policy in the 4 countries. Is it really a European crisis? Is it really a refugee crisis to be a crisis of solidarity? Yes. But then again, there is no solidarity without trust. There is no solidarity without trust. So the question is, What are the factors behind the deficit trust between the V4 countries and other member states of the Union, between the V4 countries' governments and European institutions? No solidarity without trust. So trust has been fundamentally undermined. Why? Part of the answer is to be found in public opinion results, social attitudes in V4 countries towards the situation. Now the picture is pretty consistent and very sad. Around 70%, in case of Hungary, up to 80% of the population in our region believes and actually perceives the migration refugee crisis or challenge in terms of a danger, a threat, an imminent threat to personal and collective security. And this is a pretty existential situation when you have two-thirds of the population identifying the situation in terms of an existential threat. That is why we have Robert Fico and Viktor Orban saying, do not be ashamed to call the refugee, the migration challenge to be a danger. And that is really a situation when you have a very strong message from the governments that we are not actually dealing with refugees, we are dealing with migrants who actually bring with themselves the potential existential threat to our own security. Don't be ashamed to call the migrants in terms of danger. That was Robert Fico's message, and that was also also Viktor Orban's message during his famous speech of March last year, commemorating 1848. It is forbidden to talk in Europe nowadays about a threat. That is, and the language, this kind of language really implicates emotions, polarization of attitudes. But of course, again, the V4 government's stance on the issue is very much based in the fears, in collective fears, deeply embedded within minds of majority of citizens of our countries. Again, as any kind of policy, this is also migration policy is not made in a vacuum. If you have the situation like two-thirds of the population strongly believes that migration is a danger, then of course the government has extremely powerful argument to be used in international fora to claim we are simply protecting our own citizens. And actually Robert Fico in his electoral campaign was using this kind of language that together will protect Slovakia. Same with Viktor Orban. Viktor Orban's rhetoric very much accelerating this collective fear psychosis, I would dare to say. The picture is pretty consistent and sad enough, I would say, again, when we are dealing with this kind of collective fear psychosis, of course, emotions replace rational debate. So in this sense, part of the explanation why we are now witnessing is kind of what, for instance, Viktor Orban describes in terms of European awakening. Part of the answer to explain the rise of, I would say, Eurosceptic or Euro-reject moods across Europe is this kind of compensation, psychological compensation for security. You have raised the question of an explicit challenge before governments explicitly challenging European Commission relocation system. Yes, that is very much true. But again, on the other hand, the governments of V4 countries have a very strong argument. We are simply protecting our own citizens. We are in a situation when 2/3 of the population believes that migrants constitute an imminent threat to individual and collective security. We are simply doing whatever it takes. This is, by the way, a famous quotation from Mario Draghi's frantic effort to save euro. We are ready to do whatever it takes to protect our own citizens, and this is very strong kind of message. Yes, that is why you have this open conflict between governments, especially of V4 countries, and European Commission. I don't know if you notice the fact that Mr. Avramopoulos called off his visit in Warsaw recently to conclude details about actually agreement between the Polish government and European Commission over the new headquarters for Frontex. Don't forget that we have infringement procedure launched against Hungary for violation of EU asylum regulations. European Commission launched infringement procedure against Hungary. In response, you have Slovakia and Hungary submitting case to Court of Justice. For what? For interference into national sovereignty. So you see, certainly partners do not trust each other. So European crisis, migration crisis, refugee crisis is about trust crisis. We don't simply trust each other at societal level, at intergovernmental level, at European level. Well, and that is really causing, this is really an existential threat to the future of Europe. So yes, we do very much hope that this coming months will be kind of decisive time for what we wish to see to be our common European future. On the one hand, we might witness, yes, further fragmentation, better say, not so much disintegration, but further fragmentation of the Union, Schengen, mini Schengen sort of arrangement. That is very much likely to happen. After Brexit, yes, we can expect again major reshuffling of balance between Eurozone members of the Union and non-Eurozone members of the Union. So again, the migration and refugee crisis may actually contribute to further fragmentation of the EU. And V4 governments have been trying to actually put forward this argument about ineffectiveness of European response to the challenge by actually, yes, proposing on an alternative vision of European finality, and that kind of vision is to be found in, again, this famous speech made by Viktor Orban in March 2016. Liberal, cosmopolitan Europe versus liberal, cosmopolitan, bloodless Europe, or Europe of nation states based on leading role, or based on the supreme position of national states as the natural kind of context configuration for European policy. So again, if I may conclude, and that is why you see so much scapegoating, blaming, as on part of the V4 countries, governments. Germany is being blamed. Personally, Angela Merkel is being blamed for the crisis. Viktor Orban has been outspoken in kind of repeating like a mantra that refugee crisis, migration crisis is Germany's business, nobody else. Well, with this kind of attitude, and with this language of Europe awakening, the anticipation of European solidarity is rather a lofty expectation. It doesn't mean, however, that we as NGOs, civil society, are just, we need to just simply acknowledge this fact and just take it for granted. No. And I'm very grateful that you are here in this very room in Cracow. Don't forget, a few months ago, few steps from here in Błonia, we hosted this wonderful event, World Youth Days. Hundreds of thousands of young men from across the globe gathering and actually proving that that multiculti is possible. We just need to agree on certain principles, such as respect for every single human being, respect for cultural difference, religious difference. Let us not forget that what made us European was this acknowledgement that we were all once migrants in a sense. So this historical amnesia about our past is particularly striking. But again, just to conclude this part of my contribution, yes, in terms of sociological picture of the situation, we are now in a very kind of crisis situation. We have this overwhelming kind of Armageddon scenario of Islamic extremism invading Europe, destroying our culture, our civilization, with this kind of Armageddon kind of scenario. We have lots of blaming, scapegoating, and above all, lack of trust. But again, the worst scenario to be is to actually conclude that there is no alternative to such situation. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much for the thoughtful words. And now I would pass the word to Mr. Quaz, and who will tell us about the German perspective.
So I don't think I need two. So I'll turn this one around. Yeah, thank you, Laszlo, and thank you for the introduction. There were so many issues raised by the first panel, so many issues raised by on this panel already, and also so many issues raised by the title of this panel. So the perception of migration in Germany and V4. Can there be solidarity between states and people? So I think in my presentation I want to focus on solidarity because I think it's central to the question here. And I want to focus on the two actors who are named in the title, which are states and people. And in my opinion, people here is very loosely defined, and I will focus on civil society in Germany. And I want to touch on what you said, the lack of trust, and let's see if I can give us some hope. The debate later on will show if I've managed to be successful or not. So what we've seen in the first panel and in the discussion after the first panel was what we've basically been seeing since summer of 2015. Since the outbreak of the migration crisis in Europe. There are, on the one hand, countries who would subscribe to the resettlement and relocation quota system. Germany is one example. And on the other side, countries who would not, or who would only reluctantly subscribe to this quota system. V4 countries. And the dividing issue. There was always the reproach from one side that we are being solidary. You said that Germany as the champion of solidarity in this time, and the reproach towards the other side that they're not being solidary. There have been many termini to describe this lack of solidarity. So there was the solidarity gap, the cancellation of solidarity from before, or the withdrawal of solidarity. And I think all of these terms only are symptoms to a bigger problem, which is underlying all of this debate. And it's the complete absence of a shared understanding of what could be long-term migration to the EU, and the lack of a common strategic asylum and migration policy with regards to achieving this goal. So in my opinion, solidarity in itself cannot be the goal, because it's too loosely defined. Solidarity is only the means to arrive at a shared understanding, a common set of goals, and the agreement to the methods to achieve these goals. However, and this has been stressed in the first panel already, solidarity is a founding principle of the European Union, and as such we should uphold it and make no exceptions to it. So to answer quickly the question asked in this to this panel, it's not so much the question whether solidarity is possible. I think solidarity is a necessity in regards to responding to migration. And migration, you've said this, Kasia, very well. Migration is here to stay. Let's not be fooled. The EU-Turkey deal only tackles one aspect of migration to the EU, be it migration of refugees. So I'll use a loose term. But it doesn't address the other waves of migration which are coming through the Central Mediterranean or the Western Mediterranean. And there is no long-term and comprehensive approach by the EU. And there is none because there is no common understanding how to solve this. I think a first step to get to a common understanding is if we would talk about the perceptions of migration and start to identify perceptions within each individual member state. Obviously 28 members, this will be a very long, 27 soon, but this will be a very long and painful debate, and it demands leadership, demands political leadership. But I think if we take these perceptions seriously, this can be a start to reconciliate the views. And I think this is also something where we can start building trust between the member states. So I'm from Germany, has been said. So let's present the German perception of refugees and migration, which has been prevalent in the last 2 years. In 2015, we had 890,000 applications for asylum in Germany, and last year was 280,000 refugees coming to Germany. There was a huge backlog of applications. I mean, if you've seen the pictures of Berlin, of the central administration, people camping outside of the central administration to be able to apply for asylum, you can imagine that there's a huge backlog. I think the backlog by now is 450,000 asylum applications which have not yet been dealt with. Even though this year we had last year, 2016, we had only 280,000 refugees coming to Germany. The overall number amounts to more than 1 million, and this is a huge number, and this is what has shaped the perception of migration and the migration and refugee crisis in Germany. How does the recognition rate look like? When it comes to the biggest group of asylum applications, which from Syria, Iraq, and Afghanistan, the quotas are different. Syria and Iraq are usually around 66% who get a positive response, and Afghanistan is, as Lasso said, is declining. Now there's less than 50% approval, and overall the approval rating is at 62%. And as I said, there's still a huge backlog, so we don't know how the approval ratings will develop throughout this year. And there are a lot of asylum seekers still in preliminary arrival centers. And it's important also to mention that there's two forms of protected status. This is asylum, and also this subsidiary status where people do not receive asylum. They get decidedly less subsidies, and the main goal is to give them some form of protection, but not to have them stay for a long period, and they are not included in the long-term integration scheme. Included into the long-term integration scheme are only people who receive asylum, and there have already been shifts in the German asylum law to speed up this integration process. So there were two laws, asylum package number 1 in October 2015 and asylum package number 2 in February 2016. And they had two goals. The first goal was to speed up the asylum process, to reduce the number of asylum cases, so a lot more countries have been added to the list of countries of safe origin. And on the other hand, it has been, the other aim was to integrate these groups more quicker, and this was based on the principle of duties and privileges. If we're looking at the German population and how they perceive migration and refugees, I wanted to find very interesting numbers, but I didn't manage them. And maybe this is an impressive fact on itself, that the German population is very much divided. So 50% are for migration, or 50% are against it, or uncertain about migration. Around 60% see that the burdens and the cost of migration will be too much for Germany. 40% are more optimistic. But if you bear in mind that we have accepted or received 1 million newcomers to our country, I think it's impressive that there is no huge backlash against migration, against asylum seekers in Germany. And this is also after the terrorist attack in Berlin in December 2016. Around 50% of polled people say that they will not change their way of life, and that they altogether feel safe in Germany. So this is very interesting, that we in Germany have this general feeling of stability and security, even though we have seen so many newcomers to our country. When it comes to security, it has been a top priority now. Obviously, in September 2017, we're having the elections, so security is now becoming a campaign issue. But and the coalition parties and the Green Party, they have proposed packages to increase security in Germany. But what's interesting is that Chancellor Merkel and the other cabinet members are making it clear that security has to be reconciled with our liberal values and democratic values, and that the basic right to asylum and as it is laid out in the Geneva Convention and our basic law will not be infringed upon. So there is this balancing between providing the feeling of security and also upholding the state of law and the rule of law mechanisms in Germany, and not lead a very emotional debate. What might be one reason why Germany is having this very stable feeling and this feeling of stability? I think an essential role in the public's perception of refugees in shaping the public's perception has been thanks to civil society organizations. And I don't want to say NGOs, because NGOs are usually formalized and they have a certain form of, they're fixed. What we've seen since summer 2015 is spontaneous foundings of groups who were first responders, who actually, I think everybody saw some of these groups on TV in Munich, people handing out drinks and food for refugees who arrived at the Munich train station. But then they've shifted towards receiving refugees, helping them find accommodations, helping them to arrive in Germany. And they've also shifted their work. They've shifted from the first tasks, which was helping the refugees arrive in Germany, and now they're shifting towards integrating refugees into German society. And it's important to note that these institutions are very flexible in their work, and they're very, very, I think, efficient in their work. They also, in some instances, they've taken over jobs that the state would have to do, but 1 million people, the state was overwhelmed, and so they stepped up and filled in the role of the state. And in some instances, they added to the possibilities of the state. So one very important fact for integrating refugees is to have meetings, to have face-to-face meetings of Germans and refugees, just to reduce the fear of the unknown, or reduce the fear of the other. And I think this is important because the state cannot in itself tell people to go and meet refugees. So there was this welcome culture, and there's interest in getting to know these newcomers, and I think they were very successful. So I skipped this part. Konrad Adenauer Foundation, I've mentioned it before, we're also active in Germany, and if somebody reads German, there's a best practice guide on how to deal with refugees, how to integrate them in your community. It's also on our website. I can hand it out to you later. So this is very important. There was the state, but there's also civil society, which is at first very loosely organized, then more and more formalized. And I think the state and civil society have gone hand in hand, and both have contributed to this very stable feeling in Germany. And I think this is also the biggest potential for creating solidarity inside the EU, because civil society institutions can function as an interlocutor between on a transnational level. So they could start building trust. They can show best practice examples. They can talk about their experiences. They can talk about difficulties. They can also talk about doubts, fears. Yes. You know, talk about how they've managed to deal with this what has been called a wave or a catastrophe, and show how, on a very local level, the migration and refugee crisis has been managed and has been managed successfully. This direct exchange obviously is not possible on the EU level, but we're at the moment right now. As I said, we're at the dipping point of migration from the Middle East, and I think the EU should take this time to really start this dialogue with the aim to find a strategic goal. Because only if we have a goal, then we can shape our policies to achieve this goal. The underlying foundation should always be solidarity, and obviously should be tied into our common European values. There has been this proposal of flexible solidarity, which has been critically received in Germany because it kind of suggests that countries can subscribe or cancel solidarity. But I think flexible solidarity has its value because there are so many issues and so many areas where the European Union has to find solutions: foreign policy, security policy, development aid. And there are actually many areas where countries can show their solidarity. And this could also be a way to start trust. So to conclude my remarks, I think what we're talking about today and what we're talking about when we talk about this issue, in the discussion we should always be aware that we're talking about the shape and the future of the EU. And the question, if it's likely that a policy of shared solidarity will prevail against national and particular interests, will be answered negatively. I think this will have dire consequences for the EU. But if we say that we want to live in a community based on values and universal goals, then I think I'm more optimistic for our future. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Michael. And now I would like to open the room for questions. Do we have the microphones? I would like to ask all of the questions to be short and brief so that we have more time to answer them. The first. All right. All right. So the first question.
Hi, I'm Roseanne. I'm from the Netherlands. I was wondering if, in your opinions, the lack of the European identity and the democratic deficit in the EU is a contributing factor to the lack of solidarity in both the states, in the V4, and the people as well. And if we improve or strengthen this identity and, you know, less of a democratic deficit, if that would improve this current situation. Thank you.
Let's collect 2 more questions, please. There. Okay.
Hello, I'm Alex. I'm Polish, but I grew up in Germany as well. So something I asked myself, and I feel like a lot of Germans are sometimes, or like especially in the beginning, have really often asked themselves, is how long will the refugees stay? And I think, like, from my perception, the Geneva Convention was mainly, like the asylum system, how it was set up, was mainly made for short-term refugees in the terms of they won't stay longer here than, say, 10 years, okay? And now the question is, how much should we integrate them if they stay, for how long? And now my follow-up question, like the main question that I'm asking all of you, is should we allow them to work? And what does it mean in your countries? Because on one hand, it is a huge factor in integration. And I also worked in refugee camps in Germany. And when I spoke to the children, there were almost, like, a lot of them were almost fluent in German because they went to schools. But the parents weren't. The parents had a lot of trouble to integrate with the German culture or community, and they usually wouldn't leave the refugee camps because they couldn't speak German and because they didn't understand the system. But a lot of them wanted to work. And the question is, should we allow? Because usually, as far as I know, the asylum system doesn't allow it. At least in Germany, it is, in most cases, very, very difficult for refugees to work. Like, there are a lot of barriers. But on the other side, if we allow them to work, or if we even require them, all the people that are able to work, will they potentially go back to their countries to build it up again when there's peace in Syria or in the other countries? Thank you.
There's a hand over there.
Hello. Yes, I'm coming from Azerbaijan. My name is Parvin. And I wanted to ask about integration, this policy for the refugees. In November, I think, if I'm not mistaken, 2016, I asked this question from Guy Verhofstadt when he came to Warsaw, and he couldn't answer properly to this question, and that he just answered very briefly. When I asked him why, the second generation, which are living already in Brussels, in Belgium for so many years, they are, but they are coming from Morocco or some other, they're Muslims originally, they cannot still integrate into the society, and they have problems, and they're feeling the push and the pressure from the society actually in Belgium. So they're telling that I can't find a job because of my name, because of my surname. Everyone who sees my name and surname, they think I'm Muslim, so I'm terrorist, I will not get a job, but he's a European citizen. And so why it's like this and why it can't finish? I mean, this is pressure.
Thank you, thank you. And one more question. There.
Good morning. My name is Amrine and I'm from Brussels. And I work in IOM, the UN Migration Agency in Brussels. And I do mainly integration and media monitoring. And last year in November, there was one of the main Belgian newspapers that headlined Iraqi refugee raped 9-year-old girl. Immediately, the guy was detained. A lot of swimming pools prohibited refugees to go swim, or they had separate lanes or separate hours, and it turned out that the parents didn't want to file charges because the girl was actually drowning and the guy was saving the girl, but somebody else saw it and called the newspaper because it was sensation. And my question to the panel is, what do you think the role of media is when we talk about perception of migration and solidarity? Thanks.
Thank you very much. So first, I would like to give the word to Mr. Pożarlik to answer the question on democratic deficit.
Yes, well, thank you very much for this question, actually. Well, see, not only master degrees or doctorates are being, other books are being written on European identity. Some scholars, members of academia, question the very possibility to actually talk about European identity. Anyway, we are all different, united in diversity. We are united by certain norms and values we declare, at least, to believe in. This is what makes us European. So European identity is a construction process. It's like this kind of identification is to be proved by daily practice, like really yourself here working for NGOs with refugees. We are all different, and in this sense, we have different possible answers to challenges ahead us. I would say that maybe following Ulrich Beck and his famous idea of cosmopolitan Europe, as well as Europe. Basically, you see, refugee crisis, migration crisis is about a choice we can make. We can have as well as Europe, local, national, regional, European, kind of nested, multi-layered identification. No contradiction between being a local patriot, yes, national patriot, and believing in European norms and values. No contradiction at all. Or either or Europe, meaning that you need to make a choice. You cannot be at the same time. You cannot claim and declare to be local patriot, and national patriot, and European. There is a strong contradiction in terms. You cannot have more than one identity. So again, here is the challenge for all of us: either or Europe, or as well as Europe. European identity as a political project was based on European citizenship, European civil society, is based on as well as Europe identity. Whereas again, as I said, as a sort of compensation, you see, this is a very powerful psychological process or reaction. When we feel a kind of existential threat at the individual level, national level, we need to have at least a feeling that there is a way to compensate this fear. Security is a primary human need to feel secure. Yes, it's our primary need. So again, Czech public opinion polls, Slovak public opinion polls, especially prove that yes, this challenge came came suddenly. Jan Hart from STEM, Czech polling agency, explains that rapidly, in case of Czech society, the percentage of those who ready to actually, again, sociologically speaking, to give a right other people of other nationalities to obtain Czech citizenship, the percentage dropped over the after especially Paris attacks dramatically. So right now only 25% of the Czech society population is ready, yes, to acknowledge the fact that people of other backgrounds, ethnicity, nationality can apply for Czech citizenship. See? So again, to make long story short, European identity, yes, it does exist as a sort of construction, social construction. It's not ready-made. It's not ready given. And again, this kind of identity is based on the acceptance of this as well as identity, on the acceptance that we all are different, but we are somehow unified, united, better say, united by the acknowledgement of core values and norms. Europe is a place for everybody, provided he or she respects certain rules and norms. But this as well as identity, European cosmopolitan realism, as Ulrich Beck would say, is an alternative to now really growing either or Europe. This kind of essentialistic understanding whom we are, see, that we all are kind of, that we simply inherit our identity from previous generations, that being a Pole means that we behave in a certain ritual way over subsequent generations. See, that identity is just to be rediscovered by ourselves and just passed through subsequent generations. That is why you cannot choose. You cannot actually build up subsequent layers of your own individual identity. See, so my answer would be the following, and this is a huge role of NGOs to build this perspective, especially for young men, benefiting from all sorts of European projects, such as, for instance, an Erasmus project. There is no better way to build this European identity, as well as identity like professional mobility. So in this sense, yes, I believe that could be an alternative to either or Europe. Yes. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now I would like to give the word to Mr. Quash, who can answer the question on the assumed correlation between labor market integration and social integration in Germany.
At least I'll try to answer this question. Two underlying principles of Christian democracy are the principles of subsidiarity and responsibility. And I think I would like to answer this question out of this perspective. Subsidiarity means to support people in a way until they can help them, in a way to strengthen their abilities to be able to help themselves. And responsibility, obviously, I think don't need to explain this. And the short answer to the question, should they be integrated into the labor market? Yes, because this is the only way for them to become, to take responsibility, to be, to leave the state-financed subsidiarities, which are very much dependent on checks, not checks in a way that they receive money. Also, they receive money, but they're all always being monitored. And I think if we empower people to be able to take up responsibility, to be able to finance their family, I think this is a good step into integrating refugees. And also, what shouldn't be neglected is that there are money transfers of refugees who are working. If they earn money in Europe or in the United States or wherever, this money is then being sent to the families who are staying at home. And I think we should not underestimate this this amount of money which is being transferred throughout the world from the west or the north to the east or the south. I think the value which is being transferred is much higher than what the European countries are paying in development aid, and so I think there's two goals that we can achieve. I think we can achieve people taking responsibility and people helping where help is necessary. So that's my short answer, and I also would like to add that the asylum package number 1 in Germany shortened the waiting period for refugees who would want to work, and also reduced the waiting period for refugees who would like to study and visit university from 4 years, which it was before. They have now the possibility to apply for state-funded scholarships for university studies after 15 months. So I think it's also a good step into achieving responsibility and to empower them. And that was, I think, the only question you asked me. But I want to get back to something that you said about the essentialist view of identity. And I think I do not agree that there's an either-or. Am I German or European? Because I think it's the question if you consider yourself being part of something bigger. So which is maybe it's because I'm German, and in Germany we have these federal states. And so first of all, I'm a Saxon. Second of all, I'm a German, and then I'm a European. So I mean, there's always a higher level, but it doesn't conflict with my identity. Being Saxon locates me in Europe. It locates me in Germany, and it locates me in the regards to my neighbors. So I think this is not exclusive. Yeah, so far from myself.
Thank you very much, Michael. We had the third question on Islamophobia and prejudices, which I would propose to postpone to the third panel discussion, which is exactly on that topic. And I would come to the fourth question we had on media. I would like to ask Tomáš, maybe he has something to say on that.
If you allow me, Laszlo, I'm sorry, but I think I would still like to tackle a bit on the integration question, because I work in an organization which is an umbrella for NGOs working with migrants, and also I've been actually visiting Germany a lot to see what's happening on the ground there. And the thing that I have grasped from that is that a successful integration story is based on two dimensions. One is management, and the second one is ethics. So first of all, you need to have the resources, the policies, the institutions, the let's say the housing, the jobs, the schools, the language courses for the people to be able to make use of. But second of all, you also need a certain social acceptance of the fact that the people are coming. And this is exactly what we've been talking about. So in Germany, with this Willkommenskultur, and with a very predominant and very strong bottom-up approach towards actually volunteering and helping out the refugees, there is a very good chance that many of them will be well integrated soon enough, and especially their children, of course, into the German society. What we're seeing in the Visegrád countries is a completely counterintuitive approach. The governments are cutting money for NGOs and social services to refugees and other migrants, basically pushing them to the margins of the society, and in a long term creating a security threat. And we should really say this out loud, because okay, the whole migration narrative is securitized now. That's a fact. We're not going to change that. But if we want, even if we see it from the perspective of safety, of security, of course it's a good investment and a good idea to help integrate people into the societies. Then again, of course, many of those people, many of the asylum seekers, if the conditions on the ground in their countries of origin change, they will come back. We don't know really what proportion. There are some rough surveys, rough numbers. I think, if I believe correctly, it was among some Iraqi refugees in Germany, and I believe that more than a half said that they would actually like to return home eventually. But really, this is a thing, it's an open question. But not giving them a job, not teaching them German or whichever other language, doesn't really help. I think you should really, from the very beginning, provide those basic services. And I think it's the government's role to do that. Now, very shortly to the role of the media. I think we all know the media's role is crucial in general. The problem, of course, is that with the social networks, we have much less control over what is an actual edited and controlled content of what is actually the real news, what is the fake news, what is the bubbled up news. And this is not going to be very easy to change, but I think what we're actually seeing at this moment, at least in the social media sphere, is that Facebook, Twitter, platforms like this are gonna be much more controlling of what is actually happening in there. Also, this has security implications, of course. And I think this is a necessary way to go, because if traditional media, if they had their editing boards, they would just simply manage not to publish some fake or bullshit, pardon my French, news. While on social media, of course, this isn't possible at this moment. So I think this is the way it will be going, and of course we need to be very wary so that the personal rights and the right to free expression are not undermined by those actions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tomáš. Now we have time for two really brief questions. So if you have, please raise your hand. On the left side, please. For me, left. Yeah, you.
Okay, so Kamil Mikulski from Warsaw again. I would like to ask you if the problem is really about identity, because it could be as well a result, not the cause, because as everyone here realizes, the European Union is all about economic issues, and we are seriously underdeveloped in the terms of political union. There were attempts in history to achieve political union, but they failed, all of them. We have witnessed, and we witness all the time, a slow, ongoing process of constitutionalization of the union, of making it responsive to global issues, to become a global political player. And how can we manage external crises and problems, any type of them, or we don't have this identity, but also we don't have tools of responding to those problems? If union will stay as mainly economic union, it will not be capable of acting as a global player. So is it possible to achieve European identity without political union? Should the political union be prior to identity? It's a bit complicated issue, because I don't know if any attempt to create identity through institutional changes
Excuse
ever
me,
was.
I'm really sorry. Can you come to your final question? Because
Yes.
we don't have to. Yeah.
Can we achieve identity and responsiveness of the union in political terms without political union first? That's it.
Thank you very much. One more question there. Sorry, it was before, so.
Sorry, just a short comment to as a colleague from Azerbaijan regarding people who are applying for jobs with different names. After living a few years in France, me and my friends, we also met with the problems in the EU. You can be British without a French citizenship, and you won't be chosen as the first person to get a job. So we have problems also including EU. You don't have to be Arabic origins. So that's also a problem.
Thank you very much. And one more question from there, as we had. Yeah.
Zuzanna Sielska from Poland. I have one question to Mr. Tomáš. President of Czech Republic, Miloš Zeman, he said in his book 25 rozhovora sa prezidentom that he doesn't want to help European Union with a crisis, refugees crisis. And I know that Czech, they are open-minded, that they are liberal. And how do they think about Zeman's policy against refugees? How do they think about this?
Thank you very much. I would like to give the floor to Mr. Pożarlik on the question of the political union.
Well, thank you very much for this question. Just to be very short, after the Eurozone financial crisis, I believe, all learned that there is no going to be European economic and monetary union without fiscal union, just like there is it's not possible to have fiscal union without political union. So all those who are very much concerned about the future of common market and common currency, closely interwoven, if any lesson is being learned from Eurozone crisis, that's the one. No economic monetary union without fiscal union, just like it's impossible to have fiscal union without political union. But I guess you have been referring to European identity, EU as a distinct global player. Federica Mogherini has been outspoken, saying that we all have interests. That there is no contradiction between Europe being driven by interests and values. We all have our vital interest is to our values are embedded into our foreign policy, meaning that EU is being driven by the normative and stance, ethical force for good. We all have interest in being guided by common norms, and our common norms are embedded in our foreign policy. Security is our interest. Common European security is our all common interest. So again, it's just the question. It's not the question if; it's the question of how. This common European identity on global stage, and also in terms of foreign security policy, is to be achieved. And for that, once again, trust is essential. See, and in a situation when we openly challenge each other, when you have, you see, the language of blaming, in this kind of ambiance, trust as an indispensable, I would say, component of this European identification is really not very much possible. So again, this upcoming months, I do very much believe that starting from we expect March this year to be a kind of starting point for a profound process of reflection. What kind of Europe we would love to see? Again, the history of modern Europe has been a history of crises. But crisis might be approached in terms of this kind of, I would say, medical terminology. Crisis could be a terminal stage. But crisis could be a kind of an opportunity to restart, to relaunch, to give the new impetus, and it's still we do have such choice, such alternative. How do we approach the crisis? Crisis as a terminal stage, terminal phase, or crisis as an opportunity to start again?
Thank you very much. Mr. Kwas, would you like to reflect on the question from Azerbaijan?
You mean the question regarding second generation integration into main societies? Sure. Yeah, actually, sure. Because I wanted to come back to this question because we haven't answered it yet. And in my summary, I would like to point towards political leadership, which is, I think, necessary to provide an understanding that societies which are already multi-ethnic are multi-ethnic, and they will stay multi-ethnic, and that every citizen and not citizen, even every resident, will enjoy the same rights and protections. So I think this is what's lacking in Europe, and or in some countries. And I think political leadership is essential in shaping the perception of refugees. There's no question about it. And there has been one example in Germany where popular public opinion was completely against what the German government was doing, and that was shortly before the accession of Poland to the EU. The German government pursued supporting the way of Poland into the EU. I think around 70% was a high number of Germans who said they cannot imagine Poland becoming a member of the EU. Now, 13 years later, we're neighbors, not only geographic neighbors, but also neighbors and partners in the EU. And I think that sometimes if political leadership communicates the strategic aims, I think then it can withstand popular opinion polls. And this is combined with risks, obviously. But I think openly challenging each other on the European level, and then coming back home and saying, I showed them. I think there's also risk there, because this is not sustainable, because every time that you're going to Brussels, you have to come back with something more. You have to come back with something more. This time I showed them that. And, Brexit, I think that's the story of Brexit. Forcing your domestic agenda on the European level leads to something which obviously it was a referendum, democratic, and the choice of the people was to vote for Brexit. Cannot argue with this, but I think the costs of Brexit will be higher, and so political leadership was lacking in this question. And I also want to say something about that we all consider the question of what we are about to lose if we are very restrictive with asylum in Europe, if we deny people who come here protection, because asylum is not only a right to a human right, but it's also a tool for the European Union. It's something that we can show our values, that we can project our values into the world. We can shame dictators. We can say, look, your people are coming here because they're threatened in your country. Shame on you. I mean, that's very, very simple. And then we're giving them asylum because they are not protected in your country. And I think it's, if we're very restrictive, we stand to lose this as a tool to project our values abroad.
Thank you very much. Tomáš, the word is yours.
So I should probably answer the direct question, I suppose. Well, in my opinion, what the Czech president does really is something very opposed to political leadership. So he, unlike Orban, let's say, I don't think he even does have an agenda. It's very random what he says. It's basically just confirming the pub talk. And then again, you have to remember that he is a president in a parliamentary system in which he doesn't have vast executive powers. But I would say that he was very much poisoning the discourse in the past years, and at the same time he was very much able to hijack it, and so he is basically supported by a large portion of the population, and if he decides to stand up again for office, which I shall hope not, then he will have a very, very high chance of winning next year. Maybe just to wrap up into the European context, of course the governmental policies in the Czech Republic are not that fully in line with what, let's say, the president says. And I would even say, having an insight into the Czech official policies, that they haven't been restricted that much over the past years. So there is still a level of consistency in our asylum and migration policies. And maybe, so if we bring this to the European level, just like what to expect in the year to come, I think there was a lot of talk that there is a strong discrepancy between, let's say, the V4 and Germany and Western Europe. But I think there are common grounds, actually. But the common grounds are in the places where we might not like them to be. But they are there. And that's the thing. What is definitely, where is the consensus? The consensus is there needs to be less irregular migration towards Europe. And for that goal, the political leaders are ready to foster shady deals with dictators, which prevents them from doing the shaming and blaming part, which is very problematic, of course. And the second part, of course, is the securitization even internally. So I think what we will be seeing is a more restrictive, more securitized approach towards also asylum seekers and refugees. But I very much hope that the governments will at some point realize that it's in their own best interests and in the interest of their societies to actually integrate the people well, put the necessary money in place. And I shall very much hope so that also we will see a certain recourse towards a certain compromise approach in which some of the requests of both sides of this discussion can be reconciled and brought together.
Thank you very much, Tomáš. As we don't have time for more questions, I just would like to ask our panelists to formulate a message, a short message that could be written on a leaflet, maximum 1 minute per person, that you want the audience to bring home from today's panel discussion. Thank you. Mr. Pożarlik, I'm giving you the word.
Well, the last word, yes, and or the message. The message would be the following: let's try to challenge the collective fear psychosis with determination to build the Europe of hope. Let us not be paralyzed by the feeling of collective threat. Let us think about future of Europe in terms of hope and a kind of imperative to act on civil society basis. No better way actually to compensate fear than to act. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Kwas?
I thought my last sentence was my final word, so I'm already enjoying lunch in my head. So what I want everybody to take home is to, I think it's going in the same direction what you said, Mr. Pożarlik, is to listen to the other side. I mean, listen to the refugees who are coming, listen to their stories that they're telling, perceive them as human beings. Easily said, and it's maybe sounds very romantic, but I think that's necessary, because then the words that were used to describe the refugee crisis, and refugee crisis even also has a certain connotation, but this is a way to overcome the impressions which have been combined with the refugee crisis. Also, not yet done, also try to listen across the divide of solidarity, or listen across the divide of the solidarity gap, because I don't remember who said this, because I think there are underlying needs which we all share. I want to live in a secure environment. Everybody here probably does. I would be surprised if somebody would stand up and say, not me. I want to be just, I want to be treat others humanely, and I want to be fair. So I think a lot of people share these needs, and I think if we listen to these, then we can objectively start talking about ways to achieve these needs.
Thank you very much. Tomáš.
don't get locked up in bubbles, in social bubbles too much. I think that's the point. Like, it's so much more comfortable to have a discussion on a level that we're, you know, on some intellectually and maybe also ethically common level with your peers. But it's really about going out there to the streets and cafes and bars and talking to the normal, regular, everyday, common people and getting a feedback from what they think, and also, of course, try to contribute to their thoughts somehow. And I think rationalizing the debate, using numbers, figures, facts, can be really, really helpful.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for the panelists for the participation. Thank you very much for your attention and for your questions, and have a nice meal. Thank you.
Thank you.